Good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. Or if I were more jovial, I'd say let's get this party started.
Huh?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this special session. There are cards over on the table by the wall if you would like to speak to this topic. The board just came from closed session. We took no reportable action in that closed session. We have a single topic tonight. We're going to talk budget. Our time frame is now between now and 9 o'clock. We have an out of the ordinary setup because we're trying to find ways to do study sessions where we can see each other, which is more conducive to us getting the work done and sort of working together. So we don't mean to be confusing, but we're just going to be different. All right. Dr. McGee.
Good. Well, welcome, everyone. I thought tonight we would really dispense with a presentation. It's the same presentation we had at the last meeting, just a summary of what's in the packet. And I have the clicker so that we can go back and forth as we talk about the various enumerated items. So we'll really slide back and forth between slide 7, which has the A list. These are the 12 items that the leadership team is recommending for board action this evening. And there is some urgency to getting this work completed. The slide 7, 8, and are the A list items. Slide 9 is the items that were brought up for further discussion at the last meeting, but I know that there are board members that we've had some individual members have said, oh, I want to talk a little more about this. I want to know more information about that. So it is by no means just limited to these, but these were ones that were raised at the last meeting for further discussion. So those will be on slides 9 and 10. And we have additions, and of course we'll be glad to answer questions about that on slides 12 and 13. And we actually have some updates here over the, really over the past 48 hours. For example, I will be recommending that on slide 14 here, the district management group extended study and review be pulled from the addition list and go into details if anyone is interested on that. And then we have the C list. These are items the staff did not recommend for cutting. And we have those will be on slides 16 and 17. So we will toggle back and forth as the items are up there. I want to appreciate or express my appreciation to the staff who came tonight. They are the experts in these areas, and so I will take a first crack at answering the questions, but there's many details that I don't know, believe it or not, and then they do, so we are eager to have them. And I just want to take a moment to thank our teachers who are here. I know we've met somewhere before, and actually that was at the youth art exhibit. Melissa and I had a chance to go over, and I appreciate the board giving me the time to say a few words. It's a phenomenal exhibit, and you can read more about it in the weekly message. So that is it, and I'll turn it back to you, President Godfrey.
All right. We have a few cards here. So I'm going to call 3 names at a time so you can line up behind the lectern. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Dauber is going to time you, so the light will come on, and then it'll turn amber when you have just 1 minute left. So why don't we start with Kimberly Ang Lee, Grant Althouse, and Terry Baldwin. And please start with your name.
Kimberly Ang Lee. 1 in 9 students have an identified disability, of which 1 in 5 Latinos, 1 in 4 African Americans, 1 in 4 low-income students have IEPs or 504s. 35% of students with disabilities did not meet 2016 ELA and math standards. 1 in 5 of all students, PAUSD students, have specific learning differences, frequently dyslexia. Yet, 70% of all students with disabilities are in general education classes, more than 80% of their day. The Palo Alto CAC appreciates the attention and the resources this community is allocating for our most vulnerable students. 3 points. Yes, we support additions for dyslexia funding. Yes, fewer seats at Alta Vista is good management. And no, not yet to a new special education review this year. To elaborate, pursuant to California state law, we support both of the recommended budget allotments for dyslexia materials and training and for assessments. We encourage full collaboration between general and special education for identification, accommodations, and to determine if either remediation or specialized intervention is needed to improve reading. Second, we don't support another special education review without a permanent special education director. Contracting for a new review is premature. We have not had full closure on the Hair report that we already paid for. We advise that the department go back and request further clarification on areas such as teacher and administrative feedback. Based on our own research, we're not confident a DMC review would provide a complete assessment or an implementation plan specific enough for our department. The process and the provider bear a closer look. We have questions on a few other areas. On secondary SAI teachers and case managers, in the face of teacher shortages, are we reducing sections or losing classroom teachers by attrition or termination? In March, our elementary teachers reported seeing more behavioral problems in classrooms. How will this need be met? Do we need additional behaviorists or psychologists in our elementary schools? Our inclusive practices put more students with disability in general ed classes without additional support for teachers or students. Are they disproportionately impacted by larger classes and the absence of secondary TOSAs? In the wake of budget cuts and the absence of a director, we hope that the board and our superintendent will assure families that their priority is to provide the specialized services needed for students with disabilities. In 2007, then State Superintendent of Public Instruction cautioned that closing the achievement gap will involve long, hard, often uncomfortable work. It will cause many of us to change not only our practices, but our own personal beliefs. We're calling for nothing short of a true culture change. One more sentence. We believe at this time, this board is uniquely positioned to enable broad, sweeping special education reform. Thank you.
Ms. Engley. Grant Altos, Terry Baldwin, Andrea Verboff.
Hello, good evening. I'm speaking with my colleague Ann Brown on behalf of all 12 elementary school principals. Grant Althouse, I have the pleasure of serving the school district as principal of Fair Meadow Elementary School. The elementary principals and I would like to make a budget request for increased behavior support at the elementary school level. Currently, we are seeing an increase in serious behavior issues among our general education population at the elementary schools. The frequency in which students are becoming emotionally dysregulated is increasing across all of our schools. When students become dysregulated, it becomes a serious health and safety concern for the students, as well as the students' peers, as well as the staff and faculty at school. Some of the results of dysregulated student behavior is students eloping from campus, meaning running off of school grounds, which obviously is a significant safety concern. When a student becomes dysregulated and potentially physical in a classroom, it is common that a classroom becomes evacuated, meaning that we take all students and staff out of the classroom and allow that child to remain in the classroom to calm down. We've included some pictures of classrooms across our campus that have been needing to be evacuated due to physical behavior in the classroom. It results in destruction of school property, also captured in the photos there. Major school and classroom disruptions, including throwing desks, chairs, tossing of work items, slamming doors, tearing up boards, scratching, biting, hitting, kicking students and other staff. The behavior significantly disrupts teaching and learning. Principals and other school staff are spending a significant amount of time supporting students to ensure their safety and the safety of their peers. Our current reality is that we have at least 2 significant behavior outbursts a day across our school, 12 elementary schools, with only 2 behavior coaches to support those schools. My colleague Ann Brown will speak to our requested solution.
Thank you, Grant. So our primary need is to increase the behavior coaching support and to ensure the safety, as Grant said. We're requesting that the board consider an increase of funding in $308,000 so that we can hire 4 additional behavior intervention coaches, increase the number of behavior coaches, also known as BICs from now on, from 2 to 6. This would provide 1 behavior coach for every 2 schools. In addition to our behavior instructional coaches, we have 2 lead specialists in the district. They work with the behavior coaches in the specialists conduct observations, write behavior plans, and then work with the behavior coach or BIC to implement the plan and the classroom teacher. It includes training the teacher and also follow-up, which can be daily and then eventually extend out to weeks or months. We've seen success with these behavior plans when we have the BIC available to help implement it. This requires close monitoring, consistent support for the teacher and student, direct work with our behavior coaches coaching the teachers and students, as I mentioned. However, we only have 2 BICs right now, and they're spread across the whole district. And as Grant said, every day there's at least 2 children having some major behavior problems. So our BICs are putting out fires. They are not having the time to work on the plans, to support the teachers, to support the students, to support the psychologists and the principals and other staff members. They're forced to be, in a reactive stance instead of a proactive. So we request to increase the level of BICs from 2 to 6. We ask that you reappropriate the $100,000 that was allocated for busing and allocate it for increased BICs. This would leave an additional $208,000 that would need to be funded. We ask that the Board of Education consider this request as you prioritize funding changes for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Althouse and Ms. Brown. Terry Baldwin, Andrea Verboff, David Bergman.
So could I just interrupt for a moment? Dr. McGee, this doesn't appear on your list. Should it appear on the list?
No, this is a late addition.
Okay, so I'll be interested in hearing your perspective on that.
You will
Okay.
receive it, and we can ask them for more details, too.
Hi, thank you. Terry Baldwin, President of Palo Alto Educators Association. I wasn't going to talk about that, but I will echo their concerns because I have seen an increase over my 5 years in this role of teachers calling me because they've been assaulted by students and are fearful. And, it's kind of hard to go to work every day when you think you're going to be hit or something thrown at you. So I really do see this as a problem. What I really was coming up to speak about was the full-time equivalent, or 3 full-time equivalent at the high schools that you want to add. I've been speaking with teachers at the high school level. I spoke with Kim Diorio. Most feel that that money isn't well spent there because it's 15 sections among 2 sites, and it will only reduce class sizes by maybe 1 and not even for all classes. And they're like, they'd rather keep some of their TOSAs and things like that than spend that money on those sections because they just don't feel it's really going to have an impact. Unless you really want to add tons of teachers, you're not really going to reduce class size that much. So they'd rather keep the support in the TOSA area or some other areas. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Andrea Verboff, David Bergman, Carolyn Tucker.
Hello again. I was here a couple of weeks, and I persist.
Can you put your mic in front of you? The microphone. Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I'm happy to be here again. I need my reading glasses. There are fewer Spectra teachers here today because we have been at the art show, which some of you were there tonight. It's pretty stupendous, and I really urge you to go in the next few weeks. I sent a quick email off earlier today. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but I really want to reiterate that it's impossible to describe just how important the art coordinator job is to all of the art teachers in Palo Alto. There's been a lot said about how important art is. I asked you a couple weeks ago, do you like art? Everybody agreed they like art. That's an easy one. But do you value art? It is critical that we save this job. Do we value it enough for one salary? It's essential for maintaining the highest standards of art education in Palo Alto, and our kids deserve it. The art coordinator should be the most highly qualified person. We integrate curricula. Just today, I taught Alexander Calder sculpture to first graders. It wasn't just art. We saw a PowerPoint presentation. We talked about his life. We talked about what inspired him. We did science and math, symmetry, color theory, balance, gravity. And you know what? If I didn't have the inspiration, the motivation from someone like Sharon Ferguson, maybe I would be stringing beads. There wouldn't be that art exhibition if we didn't have somebody like Sharon Ferguson. We need to fill that role. I'm an hourly employee. I get paid the hour I'm in the classroom and 20 minutes of prep time. That's barely enough time to roll my cart from a storeroom to the classroom. Let's talk numbers. There are over 5,000 elementary school students in Palo Alto. I don't know how many middle school and high school. There are 20 to 25 Spectra teachers at a time. It varies. There are 10 to 15 Meet the Masters. There are 4 middle school art teachers. There are 8 visual arts teachers, more or less. There are drama, photography. Now, some of us have received emails from some of you saying, oh, let's have a compromise solution. Let's put the administrative here. Let's hire someone part-time for pedagogy. I can never pronounce that word. This is not about compromise. This is about maintaining the quality of art.
Thank you very much.
STEAM, not just STEM. Thanks.
David Bergman, Carolyn Tucker, Linda Linda.
So good evening. My name is David Bergman. It's really my honor to read a statement from one of the Spectra teachers, Karen Lenke. I'll start by saying a few words about myself. I'm married to Andrea, and so every one of her art projects is vetted through me because she figures if I can do it, a first grader can do it. So I have a lot of investments, and I've seen these wonderful projects come to fruition, and I just say I've really learned a lot, and I am progressing as the years go on. So let me read the statement from Karen Lenke. While we are all art supporters, what is at stake here is the quality of the arts program in Palo Alto. If there is no qualified, dedicated art coordinator, then the consistency, integrity, and innovation of art in this district has no champion. As a teacher, having someone to champion the vision and the purpose of the program, I would feel isolated and without support. Educators must not feel any sense of being devalued, and taking away this position affects the program students and classroom teachers, but it also dramatically the art teachers themselves. I know better budgetary choices are available. Thank you, Karen Lenke.
Thank you. Carolyn Tucker, Linda, Paul Graylin.
I'm Carolyn Tucker. I live at 555 Byron Street. If we have music and math and English and we've got to cut the budget, can we cut a few corners in art? Well, you know, there was a bombing of a village in Syria recently where children and adults were killed, and there were no words that could describe that horror. But there is a picture. Do you know Picasso's Guernica, telling the story of the bombing of a village in the Spanish Civil War? Art is a powerful language that allows us to convey our emotions and a whole range of feelings, as well as provide information. It's a very important and it is a unique subject. All children deserve to have a strong backing in art. And what about our elementary art program? Is it strong the way it is? Well, if you've been over to the youth art exhibit this afternoon, there's no question in your minds, and I do believe that all of you board members have expressed support for the art program. It's just breathtaking. And it is fun to see the art center filled with parents, grandparents, children, all wanting pictures taken of themselves and their work. It's a very meaningful evaluation for the children of their success in art. How significant is the art coordinator to our elementary art program? Well, I guess the answer to that is, how many people does it take to fill her shoes if we do away with the position? Well, I have that here. It takes a half-time teacher. This is based on the proposal that was in the board materials. It takes a half-time art teacher. It takes 1/10 of a middle school teacher at each of the 3 middle schools. It takes all of the elementary principals, and it takes a performing and visual arts coordinator. That's a lot of heads on top of that project. And by the time you pay for all those positions, you surely are very close to the $186,000 you're talking about saving. Unless you're planning to cut periods and use already employed art teachers and say, well, we'll have one less art period at Jordan and one less art period at Terman and one less art period at JLS. That's not a solution. I don't think any of you could draw an organizational chart that put this program and showed how there would be coordination. Let's just say we have a wonderful art program. It's very cost effective, and we're going to keep it.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Linda, and I'd be grateful if you'd pronounce your last name for me. Paul Grayland, then Meb Steiner.
Okay, I'm Linda Papanikolaou. I am the art teacher at Terman. I started as a Spectra art teacher probably in about 1996, and then moved over to Terman when it opened. When was that? 2001. So I've been in the art program a long time. The one thing that I will say, having seen both sides of it, I appreciate from my position now what it's like to have students who have come through well trained in art. When you are in a middle school position, all it takes is getting a kid from coming out of district who's been in a school where they've had absolutely nothing except core subjects and remedial subjects to know what is the base that you have to bring them up from. I can have kids coming in who are already familiar with watercolor, tempera, have done printmaking. I can put them to teaching other children. It lifts everybody. And just so then that's the basis from which we work on the foundation of a really good elementary program. I'd like also to move over and just second every last point that Andrea made. I am assuming when she says she's an hourly employee that the basis is similar. Come January, what you get is a 1099 listing you basically as an outside contractor. That means that although you're an instructional aide, you are not covered by either of the contracts, and that makes it a very vulnerable program. So when budget time comes, and people with more power are standing up for their programs also, we're kind of in a position of weakness. But I will also reiterate what I said in my letter. If you succumb to the temptation to save a bit by eliminating the art coordinator, you will effectively decapitate the art program because it is all 1099 employees, and it simply will not survive. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ms. Papanikolaou. Paul Grayland, Meb Steiner, Susan Covey.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Paul Grayland. I'm one of the 2 art teachers at Jordan Middle School. And I would urge you all to make a visit to the Palo Alto Art Center to see the work of our K through 12 students in a remarkable display of artistic achievement. That work is made possible. My work is made possible. The work of all the Spectra teachers is made possible through the strong, professional, and highly skilled content-specific knowledge and training of the art coordinator. This is not a position that can easily be subsumed into another one. It's not one that can easily be diced up into little pieces and parceled out to other people. I remain convinced that there has to be a way that we can find that money that needs to be cut through other means. You know, I had a really interesting discussion in a department meeting today where a music teacher pointed out that in our classes in the arts, kids come into our classes because in some way what they do there is their thing. They play the violin, they like to draw, they like to tinker with things and make stuff in the shop class, whatever that might be. And the ability that we have to give them a place to find that home is made possible through strong leadership in a position like this. And if we, as Linda put it, decapitate this position, it will never come back the way it is now. And that would be a grievous loss. So I urge you to really, really think before we act on this and give it some deep reflection. Because it's an extremely, extremely important program for the souls of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grayland. Meb Steiner, then Susan Covey.
Good evening. I'm Meb Steiner. I am president of CSEA, which represents our classified employees. And I am also a special education aide and have been in this job for over 15 years in the district. I'd like to start off speaking in support of Principal Brown and Principal Althouse's request for additional behavioral support. I think it is absolutely critical. I think we have been a wonderful district in making the choice of an inclusive program. I've seen the benefits for our students with special needs, but also for our typical students in our community at large. However, it is challenging. It is challenging. We have students with very, very high needs. I have worked with many of those students personally. The importance of getting the support and training and mentorship through behavioral experts is really, really critical. I actually want to share a story today where I met a new aide. She's been with us for about a year, and I just asked how it went and what was helpful for her. And she actually shared with me that what helped her the most was when she was able to shadow the behaviorist, and the behaviorist was then able to sort of work with her and mentor her. She felt that brought her up to speed faster than anything else that she had received. This also touches upon a broader concept of mentorship, and I want to speak out in support of STEAM and the arts. I know for me personally as a student, my love for theater still lives on today. Art is also where many of our special needs kids engage. These are the teachers that allow our students into their classroom. We can include them there. The importance of that mentorship from a credentialed teacher supporting all of these Spectra art teachers is exactly what we need for the special ed aides, is to allow those aides to function more effectively and support our students better. I really, really think that we need to think about focusing our attention on utilizing resources more effectively, and I strongly believe that having this support, whether it be in behavior support or supporting our art Spectra teachers or our TOSAs supporting all of our teachers, is a critical area that we should continue to support. I've also touched in the past briefly on other issues. I really also want to once again emphasize the equity and the enrichment of athletic transportation and field trip transportation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Steiner. Susan Covey?
Hello, nice to be here after going to the annual art show that's so inspiring, and I just got so joyful and happy. And I don't have a planned out speech, so I'm just going to go off the top of my head. I am a Spectre art teacher, have been for 16 years. I decided to come to Palo Alto after teaching. I have a credential, by the way, I have a master's, not to wow you or anything, but I mean, why am I teaching Spectre art? Let me tell you, it's because I respect the program and the priority that was given to art in this district. And okay, so like, let's just say that I'm all right, and I was, an art teacher in Cupertino, San Jose, Half Moon Bay, and they pay me more. Why did I come here? Because it's a program that really induces and encourages creativity on the elementary school. That's a foundational level. That's like the ground floor, okay? It's the ground floor. Let's get real. If you don't have it there, my sisters didn't have it there, and they said, we can't do art, Sue. They didn't get it in their school. Yes, you can do art. It's creativity. It could be taking part in engineering or other areas. It's a state of mind. We have to start from the foundational level. So that's why I'm here, but guess what? I might just go. It's not a threat, it's not a promise, but I'm just saying, if you don't have support for the arts, which is why I came here, I bought a house here because I thought we were like a whole person kind of place. And you say, you don't have an art director, then you don't have a conductor of the orchestra. You don't have the captain of the ship. What do you have? A bunch of people dispersed. And, oh, well, get together on your own. Okay, thank you very much. I don't think it's gonna happen. I'm sorry to be like, I hope I don't get too overboard sarcastic, but you gotta understand, somebody doesn't want a job that doesn't have respect. And that's it. End of my story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Covey. Mr. Grierson, your card says open forum on it, but are you here to address budget? Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Gerson. I have the privilege of serving our Duvenet community as an elementary principal. But tonight, I'm here to thank you on behalf of the Palo Alto Managers Association, or PAMA. Thank you for working cooperatively and respectfully on behalf of students, families, staff members, and residents within our district. The challenges you face in making the needed budget cuts are certainly numerous and complicated, and we appreciate your mindfulness as you continue this process while keeping all of our stakeholders at heart. As you reduce the number of district-level staff members, please be thoughtful of the possible ramifications. The redistributed workload will land on people who are committed to serving our students, our staffs, and our community with a high level of quality, and our PAMA membership is concerned about how all of the work of several eliminated positions will get reassigned, supported, and then accomplished. We acknowledge that we are in difficult financial times now, and we know from experience that these patterns are cyclical. Eventually, as our financial health grows stronger, we ask you to design a plan to restore the cuts you ultimately recommend we make now. Lastly, you are all aware of how the timing of this decision is distracting and disruptive. The resulting uncertainty that comes from this process lowers trust and morale across our organization. We ask that you work together to come to an agreement soon so that we all can move forward with the decisions and plan for the 2017-18 school year in constructive ways. With the final decisions coming as late as May 23rd, transition plans, hiring, schedules, and other critical work relevant to the start of the 2017-18 school year are in jeopardy. We, the PAMA membership, would appreciate your decisions for necessary reductions as well as added programs to come as soon as possible. On behalf of our principals, psychologists, and district leadership, thank you for your thoughtful action tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Grierson. Okay, colleagues, that's all our cards.
Did they not make it up here?
Huh. No? Can you, where did you set him down? Okay. Right next to Ken's desk.
Uh-oh, that was a mistake.
Culprit.
We might have a process hiccup.
There they are.
Hiding under his computer are more cards. I wouldn't take that
I
personally.
apologize. No, you shouldn't. I didn't see them there.
Okay. You even started numbering them. Good job.
No, I didn't touch the card.
Audrey Gold, Sally Jackson, Rita Tetzloff.
Thank you. Audrey Gold on behalf of the Palo Alto PTA Council. We thank you for your hard work and thoughtfulness as you address the difficult challenges with the PASU's budget this year. We ask to advise you of the considered position of the Palo Alto Council of the Parent Teachers Association, which represents over 7,100 community members. First, we strongly support reallocating the $6 million new school reserves to reduce the impact of the forecasted deficit. And secondly, we request that the Board of Education develop and communicate a policy regarding class size at the middle and high school levels. Finally, there are a number of items being considered by the board for cuts that we are interested in learning more about the impact and encourage you to involve the council and the community at large in understanding the trade-offs of the difficult choices that you must make. Regarding the use of some or all of the new school reserve to address the current budget shortfall, particularly in the context of the population bubble moving through the schools, we would like the district to prioritize the needs of current and expected forecasted students as it plans and allocates its financial resources, as opposed to maintaining a high reserves for unforecasted future students. The reserve was originally created in the anticipation of addressing a population bubble by creating a new school, but now that proposal has been rejected. The $6 million reserve is our collective tax and bond revenues, raised with the expectation that it will be spent to address a population bubble. We also feel locking in operational cuts for the next 3 to 5 years based on this year's budget snapshot is a needlessly rigid approach. We could use the new school reserve as a near-term contingency fund, adjusting the levels of supplemental revenue based on each year's actuals and adjusting the operational cuts needed as well. There will be a new budget proposed next year, and by then we'll know whether the forecasts were too generous or too lean, and by how much. Accordingly, there's no need to make deep and permanent cuts to important programs right now. Additionally, staffing new sections need not become a permanent and recurring cost, because through attrition, staffing levels will drop naturally as the population bubble graduates. Thus, while generally reserves ought not be spent for repeating operational costs because the funds will be depleted and unavailable down the road, the nature of the population bubble is temporary, and thus the reserve funds are appropriately spent to ensure that all students receive the best educational opportunities we can responsibly provide.
Thank you, Ms. Gold. Sally Jackson, Rita Tetzloff.
I will re-rally the rest of the line.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Good evening. I'm speaking to you today as a parent. My son is a junior at Gunn, and as an artist and as a volunteer. I learned yesterday of the proposed consolidation of the arts coordinator job and the music coordinator's job. I feel strongly that the arts coordinator job should continue as a separate position. Sharon Ferguson has been a highly effective coordinator for all the visual arts in the district, and the students reap the benefits. I was there for the opening of the youth art exhibit this afternoon, and it really was amazing to see the crowd, the children, the photographs being taken of the little artists and middle school and high school artists with their parents. The quality of the art was amazing as well. I see a lot of that art, some of it, at Gunn, starting from the beginning, the blank piece of paper, the clay. I volunteer many hours each week in the ceramics program with Jordan King, who's a fantastic teacher. And I'm telling you, the students come to that class enthusiastic and ready to work. And when their work goes through its many steps from clay to kiln to fired work, and then we tell them that there's a youth art show and their work will be in it, they really shine. I mean, their faces just light up. And it was so gratifying today to see the work, the things that I had helped them make or taught them show up in the show. They not only learn technique, they learn aesthetics, they learn about other cultures, they learn art history. We talk about exhibits at local museums. We talk about famous artists. We show them our own work. Jordan King is an excellent ceramist in his own right. But most importantly, they get to come in, relax, and do something creative with their hands. It might be the only time that day that they get to do that. And when they leave, they're smiling. There's a cheerful feeling in the classroom. I think it's all the evidence you need to see that students' well-being and art go hand in hand. And we talk a lot about mental health and well-being right now. The arts are part of that. And I think Palo Alto can come through with a way to keep this position of art coordinator a priority. Thank you very much for all your work and for considering my comments.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Rita Tetzloff?
Yes. Hello, I'm Rita Tetzloff, and I'm here today to express my concern over some of the suggested budget cuts. With the bubble classes entering our high schools and record high enrollment over the next 4 years, how can this board justify taking away resources from the 9,000 students who will attend our schools during this time? Today, 11% of high school classes are 32 or greater, and 20% of courses exceed the district high school targets. The district reaffirmed its commitment at the September board meeting to keep all class sections under 32 students for next year, or this coming year. I know an official class size policy for the upper grades doesn't exist, but we do have a de facto policy by the commitments the district has made to this community time and time again. This should be honored until an official policy can be implemented. Specifically, I'd like to request you consider the following. First, do not cut the 15 sections, item 22, which were approved to bring the 11% of large classes closer to the target of 28.5. I know some think adding 15 sections can't put a dent in the class size because this translates into about 1 less student per class. But this isn't realistic. It's not how it's rolled out. You would add the 15 sections just for those courses that are expected to have averages over 28.5. This, in fact, can bring all core sections down to under 32 without capping classes or denying students access. But it needs to happen now, not in August when it's too late to make a difference. Secondly, do not cut the 2 high school FTE, item 13, in the name of balancing and setting minimum class sizes. Balancing was a priority this year already, and it is not obvious that any further savings can be made. And the high schools with 80 different core course offerings per school can never achieve the balance our middle schools have achieved with only 2 math course sections, course choices, and 3 language choices for 7th and 8th grades. And setting minimums is an untested idea, and if you are overly optimistic in predicting FTE saves, class size in core areas will increase. Many of the smaller classes are some of our languages like Chinese, German, advanced electives, and even new offerings. Do these go away? Thirdly, please don't eliminate the high school clerical support. In closing, I understand there is a lot of pressure to take resources from the high schools, as our high schools are expensive, and removing these funds is tempting. And it's easy to say 1 or 2 doesn't matter, since there's no way to prove or disprove this. But I need to remind the board that these bubble classes moving through the high schools over the next 5 years are not just statistics or averages. This is the last chance Palo Alto Unified has to make a difference in these kids' lives. These kids have had larger classes throughout their entire schooling in their 9 years of schooling, or 8 years. Their 5th grade classes had 27 to 29, unheard of today for 5th graders. And their middle school class and math had 30 to 33, also unacceptable. Let me just have one last. The district has chosen to balance the budget by subjecting this cohort of students to larger class sizes for the last 9 years, but it's not too late to get it right for their final 4 years.
Thank you.
Please do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to say again that that was our last speaker, unless there are other cards, hiding in your hand. Okay. Okay, Carmen Munoz, you're up.
You've had some fun with that, though. I can see that.
Carmen
You know, you
Munoz
gotta do
from
what you can
PTA Council. Just continuing the letter from, that Audrey Gold was reading. A class size policy in the upper grades is needed. As we researched information, we could not find a clear position despite some discussions and documents shared at the prior board meeting. We understand the enormous difficulty of the effort to balance class size, and we strongly believe, as shared in our letter, October 18th, 2017, that our students and teachers deserve class sizes that give students the opportunity to thrive. We ask the board to develop a policy that relies on the most thorough research available to ensure that board decisions are made with a clear understanding of the educational trade-offs with respect to class size. Finally, we want to share with you our particular interest in the items below and ask that you listen to the community members that have spoken about them, from the possible budget balance ideas from 2017 to 2018. Proposed prioritized spending reductions, spreadsheet attachment D. Line 3, art, in the category of district office, recommended budget cut that would consolidate the art coordinator with music coordination into fine arts coordinator. I'm just going to read the lines because they're all described. Line 12, Tosa High School, in the category of certified classified personnel. Line 16, clerical position, in the category of certified classified personnel. Recommended budget cut that review and consolidate clerical positions at the high schools. Line 22, teachers, high school, in the category of previously approved program ads. Potential cuts for consideration that would reevaluate the 3 teachers. Line 23, equity administrator, in the category of district office. Potential cut for considering that would consolidate the equity administrator. From the potential program additions, attachment D, line 1, parent liaisons, in the category of ongoing additions, potential addition. Line 12, the special education. We would like a better understanding of the consequences of making these changes and additions, and encourage you to include the PTA Council and the community in your decision-making process. Additionally, we applaud guidelines suggested at recent board meetings to refrain from cutting programs that directly benefit students or support teachers. Thank you for your work on this challenging issue. We look forward to working with you to resolve the budget issue and hope you will include PTA Council concerns in your deliberations. Again, we strongly urge you to use their reserve to alleviate the need for permanent deep cuts to important programs and to develop a coherent policy on class size in the middle and upper grades. Sincerely, Audrey Gold and the
Thank you, Ms.
PTA
Munoz.
Council.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. All right, colleagues. That really is the end of our cards. Ms. Mack or Dr. McGee, is there some way you want us to do this that would be most useful to you?
Well, we're here to hear from you, so
Is that,
we're glad to answer questions on any of the items.
you on board with that, Ms. Mack?
So we're here to hear
Okay.
discussions from you.
Okay, well, let's start with Mr. Collins.
Do we have a process we want to use? Do we want to go line item by line item?
Last time we picked ones that at least 3 of us wanted to talk about, or?
How about, I know for me, I'm ready to talk about what I'm willing to cut and what I'd like more information on or what I don't want to cut. Should we maybe get over the first hurdle of approving the things that we seem to have consensus on when we were here last time? We could. We could probably.
That's on line
Okay.
pages 7 and 8, yep.
So if we feel like we have consensus on that, maybe we can get a motion on that, and then we can move on to the next set of line items, like the rest of the A list.
So this is the,
Slides 7 and 8 are the recommended.
You have the slides in front of you.
They were on the
Right, but I'm
table.
working for this, I've been working for the schedules because I got them marked up.
Yeah, and the numbers correspond to what's in the board packet. Correct, Ms. Math?
So maybe the easiest would be to look at attachment D. Right,
Attachment C or B?
D, attachment D.
D, E?
D, A, B, C, D, D.
D like dog.
Got it.
Okay. So when we were here last time, we had all the way through where that line is written, that underscores that 1988050, that we didn't have, we seem to have consensus on being willing to cut to that line. Does that sound familiar to my colleagues? Does someone want to make a motion on that? And then we can move on to the next set of line items? I'm cognizant of the reading that's going on. I want to give these guys a minute to read. You seem okay?
Yeah.
You all right with
I'm
that?
looking for the item about balancing,
It's below.
it's below the,
Here, it's this one.
got it, okay,
Number 13.
got it.
In the middle there.
Thanks.
So Jennifer, I didn't mean to stop you there.
I move that we,
You can say that you move that we make the suggested cuts that sum up to 1.9888050,
Right.
as outlined on page 7 of the
right. so-
presentation.
All right, I'll watch what she said. I will move that we adopt these cuts or approve these cuts that are in attachment D in section 1. Numbers down to, that total $1,998,050.
Okay, moved by Ms. DeBrienza,
I'll second that.
seconded by Mr. Dauber. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, let's put that aside and let's move on to the rest.
Right.
I just want to point out in terms of process that since we have not yet adopted a budget, what we're really doing here is instructing staff to prepare a budget that makes these cuts.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Right.
And then
Absolutely.
they'll finally adopt that when we adopt the full budget.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber.
Right, I do think that is important. We're not adopting the budget tonight.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so maybe we should go through the next set of things that are listed as priority A and talk about those. Mr. Collins, are you comfortable starting?
Yeah, sure. On the list of things on priority A, I'm comfortable with all except 3 of them. The 3 I'm uncomfortable with are reevaluate 3 teachers previously approved for reduction of class of middle schools, which is item number 19. The similar, require all classes greater than 10 students, et cetera, which is item number 13, which I have been educated effectively means reducing special education teachers at our high schools.
We'll clarify that.
So, yeah, I think useful to get clarification. And item number 3, which is the district office art coordinator position that we've heard about.
So you're looking through the rest of A?
Well,
not just
22 is
the
a
next
B,
section.
right?
Yeah,
Is 22 a B?
Right.
I'm also,
Yes.
I've also got an issue with 22, but that's a B.
but that's a B. So you're looking.
Not up to that
Doing
yet.
the rest of the A list.
Okay.
Right, so we're just on A's down.
Okay, so those are the 3 that you would like to maintain or have more questions about.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we see where the other questions are, and then we'll come back through and have Ms. Mack or the appropriate staff member discuss those topics. Ms. DeBrienza, which ones would you like to discuss?
I would love more information on number 14, the school psychologist assignment. And I, like Mr. Collins, the art coordinator, number 3, I would like to talk about. And number 13, I want to talk more about.
Number 13 was?
The require all the classes
Oh,
to
okay.
have more than
Okay,
10
it's the
students.
same as Mr. Collins?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Mr. Dauber?
I have the same items as Mr. Collins identified.
Okay, so that would be
19, 13, and 3. Middle school
19?
teachers, the balancing secondary caseloads item, and the art coordinator position.
Okay, and KD. Okay, great. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Yeah, I still feel very strongly that consolidating the art coordinator is not consistent with our goals as a district and our mission. I would like to better understand number 13, but I'm not necessarily feeling one way or the other.
Okay. Okay, and I agree with Ms. Baton-Caswell. May I suggest that the art coordinator position, since we all have a question about that, that we suggest we just take that off the table?
That'd be fantastic.
Are we comfortable with that, or do you want to discuss it
Well,
more?
I was, so there's a proposal on the table from the district that I think changed from staff, that changed from last time, to make the art coordinator a half-time position rather than a full-time position, and to move some of the administrative responsibilities elsewhere. Am I getting that right?
You are. It's really to name an art lead teacher, so it would be a certified teacher to be a lead teacher. When you add all those together, it comes to about, I think, 0.6 or 0.7, I can look, it's in the packet, 0.6 or 0.7 FTE. So it saves some money, not a great deal of it. Let me put it this way, we do not object to retaining the art coordinator's position, just because it does not save a full administrative salary by a long shot.
Okay, other,
So let me just, I just want to understand what, so
Yeah.
what you're saying essentially is that given that,
Right.
that the incremental savings isn't worth it in your mind, and you'd rather just withdraw the suggestion about changing how that position is
That's correct.
structured? Okay.
are there other questions about that position, or are we happy with that suggestion? Any questions from,
No, I mean, if it's
All y'all?
withdrawing the proposal, that's fine, sure.
okay.
Are we making a motion to take it off, or are we just all crossing it
No,
off?
we can just tell them. Let's take that off.
Duly
our list.
noted.
Let's take that off our list to cut. I think we have pretty strong feeling about saving that. Thank you. Okay, the other one that had a lot of interest was the require all classes at greater than 10 students. It's item number 13.
Great. I'm going to start, then I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Wade, and she can in turn turn it over to others. So currently, we have an imbalance in caseload managers, and including those who, and some of those caseload managers teach co-teaching sections. So for example, I think, and Dr. Wade knows the exact numbers, it may range from lows of 9 to 10 at Gunn to 15 to 16 at Palo to over 20 at the middle school. So we're trying to equalize these. And then in addition, our classes, with the exception of a few really exceptional ones, we don't see that any education of the students would be compromised by having a minimum class size of 10. So we did the mathematics on this. It actually resulted in a reduction of 4 full-time equivalents. Now you can see in the board packet we've only allocated for 2 because we realize we're going to have to add some FTE back, whether it's caseload, whether it's co-teaching, whether it's a specially designated teacher. Again, Dr. Wade can talk a little more about specifics. But as the IEPs are developed during the springtime. So, you know, special education staffing is really dictated by IEP. So this was our best estimate at the time. And Dr. Wade, to you.
Again, I think when we reviewed the caseload distribution between the secondary schools, as Dr. McGee stated, anywhere from 9 to 10 to all the way up, I know at middle schools, sometimes they do grade level supports. Some of our grade level teachers have 28, 29, 30 students on their caseload, and that That is a significant amount of students. As far as class sizes below 10, none of us probably have done a master's schedule, thank goodness. For the challenges that our administrative teams face in terms of master scheduling, we have asked them to not schedule sections for students for classes less than 10 for academic planning and other support classes. Some of the class sections this year maybe had 5, 6 students in them, and we don't think that's the best use or the best allocation of that section for that FTE.
So, can I ask a question?
Yes.
While I appreciate the evening out, I guess I'm wondering if that number is a reasonable number. Is that having at least 10, does that serve our students best? It sounds like you're saying yes, but
I believe so.
Okay, so evening it out by just hiring more and bringing them all down, you don't think is necessary?
We would not have recommended if we thought it would have an adverse impact on any student, much less more than one. So, and again, some of this will be added back. It may be 2, it may be 2.5, it may be 1.5 as IEPs are developed.
Okay.
Can I just have to express skepticism. I mean, I have to say I'm somewhat disappointed in the way this item was presented because I think it was unclear to virtually everybody I talked to about what this item actually meant. Because the language of balanced class sizes greater than 10 students, including academic planning, and balanced secondary caseloads, nowhere mentions that these are special education teachers and educational specialists that serve our most vulnerable population in our schools. And I think if we had said cut 3 or 4, or ultimately net 2 special education teachers as the item, this would have gotten quite a different reception. So I bring a natural skepticism to it because I had to discover by surprise while I was shadowing a student at Gunn, when I was talking to the instructional supervisor, not to get her in trouble, about what her greatest challenge was for next year. She said, I have to figure out how to make do with 3 less people. And I was like, how is that possible? What are you talking about? I got the budget spreadsheet right here. And she said, oh, no, well, I have no idea, but that's what they've told me I have to do. And so that to find out that way that, in fact, that's what this item is, makes me concerned. And academic planning, for those who aren't aware, I wasn't aware until I actually attended a class while I was shadowing, is the support class that's given to students with IEPs to help them structure their academic lives and make sure they get their homework done. So it seems to me a vital class, and is getting the class size for that greater than 10 necessary? Is it useful? Is it imperative? I don't know. What impact will it have? I don't know. But I'm very, very, one of our principles as we articulated it going through this process was to make cuts as far away from the classroom as we possibly could. And so having discovered that this line item not only impacts the classroom directly, but impacts the classrooms for secondary special education students, makes me very leery to support it when, versus anything else that we could do at the district office or many other places. So I guess I'd like to hear a better justification, more concrete and more related to the actual experience of students than balancing kind of abstract, balancing caseloads between schools and minimum class size. I guess I want to hear what these teachers are doing all day. If they're not in the staff room drinking coffee, well, I guess they can't because we don't have coffee. But if they're doing something that's actually useful for our special education students today, I'm wondering how we're going to do as effective a job when they're not here. So I guess it's a pretty basic question, but I just want to make sure that this does not impact students on the ground, because that was the #1 priority I had coming into the budget process.
So I guess I can say we don't have evidence that classes of 6 or caseloads of 9 or 10 are any more or less effective than classes of 10 or caseloads of 15 or 16. Excuse me just a moment. We don't have any evidence to date as to, well, we have some evidence as to which co-teaching sections are more effective, but that's just based on the really feedback from teachers. So again, if there were even a glimmer of a thought that this would adversely impact students, it wouldn't be on there. So go ahead.
So I guess I'd like to hear from somebody. I was greatly impacted by shadowing a special needs student, seeing their experience, which, by the way, I thought was an extraordinarily positive experience.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, for this particular child on this particular day, but yes, it was very impressive to me, the supports and the structure, the education we were providing. But it made me very, very leery of pulling resources away from that. It's like, again, it's like my instinct is that is the last place that I want to pull resources away from. So for me to be convinced, rather than, while I respect your view, I would love to hear from people who are special educators in our schools to see if they share that view. Because I did hear concern in the voice of the IS at Gunn, who said, I've got to cut 3 people. And she did to her, well, I won't go into more detail about what she said, but I would privately if you like. But that gave me great pause about this item.
Right. And it gave us pause the difference in caseloads between the 2 schools as well. And again, remember that this is the equivalent of 2 FTEs, so we already know that we're going to add back some. It's a question of where and how. And whether it's a full-time co-teacher or 2 sections of co-teaching, 2 of case management, that'll be determined by the IEPs. But, we can certainly have teachers come to the next meeting, whatever you feel, whatever the majority of the board desires.
Is there, are there other questions?
I
see
had,
you're-
well, there's
you seem
2.
queued up to a question.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the sort of allocation of savings across these 2 different changes, right? So there's really 2 changes, and I think they're disconnected from each other, but maybe I'm missing that, right? There's the setting the minimum class size, and then there's also balancing caseloads. Where do you expect to get how would you allocate these savings to each of those changes? Because they're really 2 changes bundled into one.
Right, so maintaining class sizes of at minimum 10 would require that we are more prudent with our sections as far as making sure that we're not having a section, a full FTE for, a 0.2 FTE for a section with less than 10 students. So you wouldn't perhaps offer as many academic planning classes, which does not mean that the students are not getting served. To be clear, not all students with IEPs do take academic planning. That is a service that we provide if they need that service. And for students who have more significant disabilities, we would absolutely consider class sizes under 10 appropriate, depending on the type of instruction and the type of student needs for that particular, for those particular classes.
So do you see that saving half an FTE, a full FTE, 2 FTEs? I'm trying to understand
So
just
for
the
instance,
allocation.
if we cut 2 teachers, that's 10 sections, right? So, and if we look at how many academic planning classes we're offering, and we redistribute those academic planning classes and bump them up, let's say some of them are at 5 or 6, and we make sure that all of them are at 10 or more, then I don't know how to assign. I mean, we're talking about 2 teachers, we're talking about 10 sections. Not all teachers teach all academic planning. They teach co-teaching, they teach some academic planning.
Okay, and then the secondary caseloads, what do you expect to save in terms of FTEs by balancing secondary caseloads?
So for instance, this particular lift right here is really about trying to balance the caseloads between Gunn and Pally. Pally's caseloads are somewhere between 16 and 18, depending on the teacher. And Gunn, they're running caseloads between 9 and, let's say, 14, 15, something like that. So we are trying to bring those caseloads between Gunn and Pally equal. And this does not help us to address the caseload distribution at the middle school at this point.
So to Mr. Collins' point, I guess I'm trying to understand from the perspective of a special education student, if we were to adopt this change, would their experience be large? Would that mean to them that they're more likely to be in a larger academic planning class, or that they're going to receive somewhat less attention from a case manager? Or, I'm trying to sort of get a sense about what the consequence on the ground is for that student.
I don't know. I mean, it could mean either of those things. It could mean a teacher has 15 students on his or her caseload as opposed to 9. So, I mean, effectively, they don't have the same amount of time, but caseload distribution typically for students who have learning disabilities across the county is 24. The allocation for resource specialists, the maximum number of students on a caseload for students who have learning disabilities is 28. We do not maintain, if we can, caseloads of 28. So we have tried to maintain caseloads of 24 or below. So in this case, the high schools have maintained lower caseloads because we've added staff to accommodate the co-teaching and in coordination with the academic planning.
And we don't have any evidence that the students' experience at Palo is any worse than it is at Gunn.
Or
higher
students in
caseloads, with higher caseloads and fewer co-teachers.
And how did we wind up with an imbalance?
When we were looking at co-teaching at Gunn and Pally, we worked with both principals on their design for their master scheduling. And as we were designing the master schedule 2 years ago at Gunn, they approached co-teaching in a very robust manner, making sure that there were co-teaching offerings in most departments so students could access classes.
I see. I understand. So it's a sort of side effect of the different approach to co-teaching at the 2 high schools.
Yes.
Ms. Baton-Castle, do you have questions on this one?
No, but I am reluctant to jump into sort of a value judgment that a class that has 10 kids in it is better taught than a class that has 5 students in it. I don't think we have that information. So I want to be really careful about making a value judgment about that. The way we can get information is, as Dr. McGee suggested, is bring some teachers in to talk about that.
So can I make a suggestion? Would my colleagues like to move this to the B category for now so that we can continue to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're ready to make a decision, that's my sense.
Is our only option to move it to B or vote to cut it? Because I think it's still, through a lot of these rounds, the staff has kept it in A. And so I don't really see moving it to B right now. I see we might need more information, but
Okay,
I
so we'll
think
just
it
leave
makes
it?
sense to leave it at A if that's where.
Is that all right? Is that okay with
Yeah, that's fine.
my other colleagues?
I might suggest, if you'll give me permission, if we are considering taking this off, we would need to give authority to personnel and to our principals to hire staff because these cuts were made for retirement and natural attrition. So if we're going to go look for teachers, we need your authority to do so. This is a very difficult positions to fill. So if you're going to move in that direction, we would appreciate your guidance sooner rather than later.
That's very good input. Okay, so colleagues, do you want to leave this be for the moment and go back to it a little later on this evening so you can noodle on it a little bit? Do you want to make a decision on it now? This is one of the few in the A category that has a lot of initials next to it. Mr. Collins.
Well, as I mentioned before, I would really value additional information on this. So,
Okay.
and it sounds like the people who could give it aren't in the room, so.
Okay, so let's put it aside for now.
Yeah, so if I can say, what kind of additional information, if you're going to ask teachers, would you rather have classes of 5 or 10? We don't even need to bother with that. But what kind of evidence would you be looking for? Would you be looking for the difference between the Pally experience and the Gunn experience?
I guess what I would like to hear is from building level special educators, how this is going to impact, how they perceive it's going to impact the student experience. And perhaps from, if there are anybody on the CAC who thinks they have insight into this, I wouldn't mind hearing from them as well.
So it's just hearing from people, but no evidence regarding grades, other metrics that we might have.
If you have metrics, I'd love to see them, sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm certainly interested. I hear the case that staff is making, which is I think that the experience at Pali and in larger academic planning classes supports the idea that there isn't a service quality difference, right?
Yes.
And so I would certainly like to see backing for that idea. I guess I'm struck a little bit, and this is sort of hearsay, so I can't, but
Right.
I'm trying to understand a little bit the concern versus that perception to see if I can understand where that gap is. And I think that's probably where you are as well. Yeah.
Excuse me?
Okay, so shall we leave this one for the moment?
Yeah.
All right, the other one that had some attention was line item number 19, 3 teachers previously approved for middle school class sizes.
So we, and I may ask one of our middle school teachers or Ms. Olfak to weigh in on this. As you know, through the expert scheduling of Mr. Jacobowski and Ms. Olfak before they left Jordan and JLS, and with Ms. LaPlace over at Terman, we were able to balance our classes. And we had, I can't remember, just a very few classes of 31, and most of those, I believe, were in world language. So we are at our target. We by and large, I think would like to have some classes at 6th grade closer to 24 than 25 or 26. But we didn't have issues this year, objections to the current class sizes that I know of. We have other issues really around some of these behavioral matters that the elementary principals brought up. But we didn't have the kind of complaints we had last year about the impact of classes that were over 30 the year before. So I think that we've already done a really terrific job of managing the middle school class size. Most of the bubble has moved through our enrollment in middle schools. I know Terman is down. I'm going to look at Kathy, who knows the exact numbers for Jordan and JLS. Jordan may be up a bit, Terman's down. So we don't see the need to hold this for middle school sections. So again, this, as we look at consequences and trade-offs, let me just go back to the last item. If the board, wants to just run the caseloads and co-teaching the way we ran this year, that I would say that would be a better use of funds than holding aside $375,000 to reduce a few middle school classes by an average of 1 or less.
Colleagues, any other questions about that?
Can I just sort of share my thinking on this issue?
Absolutely.
So we've been talking a lot about the bubble classes and about 3 positions at middle and 3 to 6 positions at high. And what I'm hearing from Dr. McGee and from our principals is that right now, you guys have got it dialed in. You're feeling good about it. I think our principals are saying they're feeling good about it. To me, this is where the idea of using our reserves, I think it's very nice that we have reserves there. If you are in fact correct and we've got this dialed in, then we're fine. We're not really talking about new teachers. We're talking about new sections. And I think if you're telling us it's good, and Dr. Herman and I were talking earlier today, and I was looking at her master scheduling for the fall, and it looks good. And of course, more people come in and some people drop classes. But if it turns out in August and September, there's an issue, we open a section and we use some reserves to do that. And then next year we know, okay, the estimation that you all made this year was off. You thought you had it dialed in, you didn't, now we have to make some changes. If you're right and we don't need to open any sections, then okay, you guys have this dialed in. So it seems as though this district staff is pretty comfortable right now with the sizes and with your planning for the fall, but we do have this reserve there. If it turns out that it doesn't work out, something unanticipated happens or whatnot, and then we can adjust the following year. Okay, it wasn't right. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about it now, that those are there to add a section here or there if need be, but right now I don't hear anyone on staff who's in charge of these schedules expressing any concern. So that's just what I'm thinking about it right now.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments in that same space?
So, well, I'll reiterate what I said last time, which is that to me, the ultimate question is, how do we spend dollars in a way that positively affects education for students? And I feel the most confident about the answer to that when I'm hiring a teacher, right? Because those teachers are the ones who are directly teaching our students. So if we increase the number of teachers and decrease class sizes, I think that has a benefit. These dollars, both the, whereas, you know, the case for other expenses is more indirect, not, you know, not correct but less discernible. These dollars, both the 3 teachers for high school and the 3 teachers for middle school, these are the positions that the board a year ago allocated in order to argue that it was possible to reduce class sizes while still granting a substantial increase. And at the time, I said, teachers that are not yet hired are vulnerable to cutting, which is exactly where we are. But the fact that they're not yet hired doesn't mean that they wouldn't be valuable for our students. I would certainly, you know, if it were up to me, which I guess to some extent it is, at least 20% of it's up to me, I would press much harder on cuts in administrative staff in the district office before I would decide not to hire teachers. In fact, I probably will suggest at a later point in this that we issue Dr. McGee up kind of a reverse blank check and just give him a number and ask him to meet it in the district office. So I think it's, one final point about that, you know, it's hard to demonstrate need for teachers, right? That if we don't have those teachers, some disaster will befall us. But that's how we get larger class sizes, is arguing that this teacher and that teacher and that teacher isn't needed, and we can manage with larger class sizes, and pretty soon we are looking at classes of 30, 31, 32 students. So I prefer to think about it in terms of what's the best benefit that we can derive for our dollars, not, you know, taking comfort from the fact that we're not going to have a disaster if we don't hire these folks. So I'm very uncomfortable with not spending the dollars on high school teachers. I would much prefer to take those $375,000. If we don't need them for middle schools, or if we would benefit more from having those teachers applied in high schools, then let's hire them for the high schools and have 6 teachers for the high schools.
Can I make a comment on that? And can I ask Ms. Ofek to come? I mean, I'll wait, but.
I'm always happy to hear Dr. McGee. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you join us up here? So we've talked to all the secondary principals about this, and I'll ask Ms. Ofek to answer precise questions. So rather than looking at this as teachers, we'd like to look at it as sections. Because we're not going to need, for example, a math teacher, or if we do it across 6 sections or 5 sections, I'm not sure how that's going to work. So we may, and you know, Miss or Dr. Herman, I don't know if Miss Lawrence is here today. Dr. Herman's here. Yeah. Miss Lawrence is in the back. They can talk about scheduling issues. So things will come up. You know, I have no doubt that come August we will need another section or 2, maybe more. They can talk more to that. But if you were to, as we did, if you were to ask the principals about what would the best use of this funding be, it would be to add TOSA sections, because they will contend that the teachers on special assignment will really impact instruction more than a teacher just to reduce class size. It will have a more positive impact on changing the quality of teaching. We've heard this from our student board members. What matters most is the teacher who's teaching me, more than whether I have 31 or 32 or even 33 students. So I am in agreement with the idea of putting money toward teachers, but putting it toward teachers to reduce class size, I think we need to think about other ways we can put money toward teaching and learning that will be more impactful. Thank you.
Sure.
And Ms. Ofek can go on if you would like at some point.
So I was going to say that I think we talked about this at one of our last meetings, that we've committed to making a class size policy for secondary schools. BPRC has committed to having that on our BPRC agenda on June 2nd. at 8:30 in the morning for anybody who wants to come and talk to us on that topic. Ms. DeBrienz and I are the two board members who are on the subcommittee that is the Board Policy Review Committee. So for me, I would rather have more of this conversation once we've nailed that down. I mean, I think we have the kind of the rough sketch of what that looks like, but I feel like if we get our policy nailed down in the BPRC, then bring it to the rest of you guys, and then we get that figured out. By June-ish, I don't think that we get new financial numbers. I think we don't get those until July, but at least we'll have more information on enrollment, more information on what the policy is, and kind of figure out what this is. I'm completely supportive of the idea of looking at these two line items, this one and the high school one, as potentials for reserves for the bubble. You know, on our $230 million budget, can I do this math in my head? It's less than 0.5% or something. I mean, it's a pretty small number that I feel like we don't need to make a decision on those two until we know more about what our policy is, how many students we think we have, and if we have any new news about, like, I would humbly suggest we can't forecast this closely. And so those two feel like they're just sort of hanging out there, and they should wait a little bit on making a decision about them.
So I haven't had a
Yes.
chance to talk yet.
Yes.
So.
I'm going a little more freeform because we're a study session, and I hope that's okay with you guys.
Just quietly waiting my turn on this particular
I'm
thing.
not used to having you over here, sorry.
And you're not used to me being quietly waiting my turn either, so.
That too.
I really encourage us to think about what Terry just suggested for for an additional reason. And I agree with all the reasons she brought up, but the other reason is I know what happens right now when we don't know all the students that are enrolled for the year. It's very hard for the schools to balance class size when they don't know all the kids they're going to need for Algebra 2, for example. But as we get closer towards the beginning of school, they get better at it. And so if we could have a class size policy, and if we can ask them to try to balance within the different departments, I'm wondering if we see something closer to what we saw at the middle schools once they did some of that work. I also agree with Mr. Collins and, actually, Ms. DeBrienz, idea that if it's a bubble and it's temporary and we're trying to adjust to that, that using reserves should be appropriate. I think actually Mr. Collins brought that up last time. We do need to pay attention to, folks, is we really only have two big levers. It may feel like 25 Churchill and the administrators here is a big lever, but it's really not in the scheme of things the big levers. The big levers are whether the size classes we have and how many programs, additional programs we have. And so we need to think about where our values sit on that. I'm not saying we have to decide that now, but we should discuss that, because if we had to make a trade-off between, and by the way, counseling is a program for us now. So counseling or enrichment programs or art or music or dance or whatever, and class size, just think about where your priorities are on that, because it's a big difference between saying 31, 32 makes a big difference for me, and having some other program options for ourselves. So we haven't talked about that trade-off, but I'll tell you, last time we did budget adjustments, that was the first thing we talked about, and then we made decisions based on that. But anyway, so I highly support your suggestion to figure out what our class size policy is before we start deciding what our class sizes are.
So what do you guys think about taking those two and just leaving them in for now and deciding on them later?
Leaving them in means,
Leaving them in the next budget proposal until we, like, not making any decision to take them out of a budget proposal.
So
You guys are doing
yeah, I wasn't sure.
microphones.
So in the past, what I've heard is that the later we wait on making decisions about teachers, the harder it is to hire them. So I don't want to create a fact on the ground where we decide in June, oh, we'd love to have some teachers, and we hear back, oh, sorry, we can't have those teachers because they've already been hired.
But it sounds like
So-
we're talking about sections.
Well, I mean, whether they're sections or teachers, they're people who we need to hire in order to teach them, right? Or are we talking about, do we believe that we have the ability to ramp up to these levels without actually hiring more folks, that we can use our existing staff more intensively?
So if we're talking about sections to accommodate growth over the summer, which can sometimes happen, then we're talking about individual sections. It's a 0.2, it's a period line here and a period line there. That oftentimes can be accommodated with some staff who are available and in creative ways. If we're talking about 3 FTEs, then the sooner the better. You want to hire a quality teacher. Not to say that people don't move into town in June, July, and August, but you know, obviously we want to vet all the candidates we can and give them an opportunity to do demo lessons for us and see what we do. So in that regard, the sooner the better. So it really just depends on what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So I know I'm not actually answering you very clearly, but that's
a
the
real
complexity
world,
of the
yeah.
problem. That's the real answer.
We don't know if we're going to need
'Cause
another math teacher.
At the moment, the 5 secondary principals are working on their master schedules, and they've received a preliminary allocation, and they're marching forward, and they're hiring, and they're working on things. And so far, with the FTE they've been allocated, they're able to meet all the needs right now and meet all the conditions. They're working on that. Does that change? Sure. Elective choices change, enrollment changes. By the time, the first day of school arrives in August, it will be different than today, May 3rd. So there's no doubt.
So just one more question on this. If you had 6 more FTEs, right, for the teachers, however, sections teachers, would they come back and say, oh, we've done our master schedules and it turns out we don't need these 6 FTEs, we're going to turn them back to the district? So I'm trying to understand what you mean by need here. Can make it work with the current resources, or couldn't use more resources?
Well, so those are 2 different things. Can we
Yes.
make it work with the current resources? Yes.
Could,
Can we make it work with more resources? Yes. I mean, who's going to say no to that? Sorry to be,
no,
I don't want to be flip, but like,
Apparently
who's
not
going to
you.
say no to more? But we're not in, I mean, I don't feel like we're in a situation where we can do that. I mean, every conversation we have and every discussion we have ultimately results in, we're in a budget shortfall. Everyone is conscientious of it, everyone is aware of it, everyone is mindful of it, and we're all trying to do the best and provide the most amazing experience we can for all kids, even with this. And there are, this is my take on it. We are an amazingly fortunate school district, even with the budget shortfall. And we are able to provide a phenomenal education and learning experience for our students. And so anything we get would be fabulous, but I don't feel like we're shortchanging our kids.
Can I express a slightly different perspective on this? Some of this discussion has been couched in terms of the impact on student achievement of incrementally lower class sizes, and I agree with Dr. McGee's off-stated and absolutely correct statement that the research and educational research generally does not support that incrementally lower class sizes changes academic achievement. In my mind, that's not what this is about. As some of you have heard, my view is the biggest deficiency, the biggest point of concern for me in our secondary schools, particularly our high schools, is the answer to the California Healthy Kids Survey question on do you have a relationship with a caring adult in your school, in which our schools score meaningfully lower than other basic aid districts. And we have the largest drop-off between kids who say they feel connected to school and kids who identify a caring adult relationship of any basic aid district in California. And as I've said before, my interpretation of that is our kids care a lot about school and are not as sure that the school cares as much about them. In my mind, this is one tool to address, if you want more caring adult relationships, you need more caring adults. It's hard. The adults are very busy. They have things to do. They have a lot of students to be responsible for, so if you want to have more of those relationships, having more adults around more of the time seems like an important thing. If there were other program proposals that said, here's ways we'd want to spend to have adults who have direct relationships with students, and I guess I would say that TOSAs probably don't do that for me, and that the TOSAs are not directly teaching and interacting with students, at least that's not my understanding. They're working with the staff primarily. So if we said, hey, there are other ways we want to spend this $375,000 to create more adult caring relationships with students, I'd be all ears. But in the absence of, I just want to paint that we're great with student achievement. We're great with a lot of rich programs. We're pretty good with class size. We're a lot better than we were a couple years ago. But we are not great with this. And so, to my mind, this is a surrogate for addressing what I think is one of the biggest issues in our secondary schools.
We could have the second,
McGee,
we could
can,
have Dr. Nielsen Hall.
Can we let Ms. Baden-Castle hop in there?
I actually spent some time with a bunch of teachers at Palo last week, and they all maybe, it may be, it is anecdotal, because they were all part of the social justice program. But what they told me that their biggest aha was on the program was how much looping with kids makes a difference. How much having the same kids for more than 1 year makes a difference. Nobody who talked to me said anything about the size of their classes, including the kids that there were kids in there too, and they were sharing their experience. I'm worried that we're using class size as a solution to a whole bunch of things that might have better solutions.
Are you done? Sorry, I don't want.
Yeah, I am done.
I don't doubt that's correct. Unfortunately, we haven't been proposed any other solutions. So if the choice is do nothing or hire teachers, I'm in favor of hiring teachers. If the choice is hire teachers or do institute looping programs or give more teacher preparation and collaboration time or create different kind of advisory and support programs that we don't have today, then that seems like a valid debate. But do nothing versus do something, I choose something.
Ms. DiVierenza?
Well, there's a proposal for beefing up SEL programs, and that's going to cost money. So I think that's exactly what that intention is. It also kind of brings me back to the school psychologist being cut. If we're looking at meaningful relationships in schools, these are people I think that have developed meaningful relationships with students. But I do think that brings us back to the importance of really developing our SEL programs at each of our sites. So regardless of different things changing, that we've got that in place and we've got those relationships. So I don't disagree with you. I just don't know that spending $375 maybe times 2. Right now the class sizes look okay, and the staff is telling us that the class sizes are okay. I think that last year or the year before, it was a big problem. There was a problem. And I think that the middle schools worked really hard to get it in line, and I think that the high schools are already hired new teachers for bubble coming in. It's not like it's the same number of teachers. The bubble is moving, and we're hiring new teachers at the high school to make up for it. So no, I don't want to see class sizes balloon. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I think that the staff has gotten better about managing it, and I think that there is a reserve there in case they have missed the mark or something unexpected changes over time. But I think when you talk about how we can better spend our money, I think the new SEL program will really address those concerns that a lot of us have.
Okay, if you had a comment that I stepped on, would you like to share?
No, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, I stepped on you.
I was just going, if you want to ask Dr. Herman or Ms. Lawrence questions about the value of this, we can do it now, or we can do it at a further date. Our sense is that a few things. Just adding bodies doesn't necessarily make more caring adults, and we think for example, we spend a lot of money on responsive classroom training at the elementary level. We do have an SEL program. We have a whole new Titan advisory program. So we are addressing this. Some of the TOSAs work with methods of teaching that actually do address relationships with kids. I think part of it's our evaluation system. We have not, until we start observing and evaluating for that, what are we going to get? We're not going to get the, if we keep evaluating and observing the same way we do now, we can't expect to see great improvement. And our evaluation system is scheduled for next year. So again, I love the idea of spending money on teaching and learning, equity and access, wellness and safety. Those are our 3 goals. And doing that through teachers or teacher leaders or some kind of support, I'm all for. But I think the assumption that just adding teachers at this date when, as we've said, and we can hear from our real experts in the field who work with us every day, our high school folks, that we are doing well with the resources we have. And if there's more, please let them, if you want to allocate 15 sections, if we could give that to them, and then they can come back to us with, hey, here's how we can use it to maximize caring adults, to an achievement, get the best bang for the buck. That kind of goes to that item you were saying earlier, Mr. Dover, about the reverse blank check or something. I would trust their judgment on that, frankly, more than I trust my own.
So can I make a suggestion to kind of move us forward and make Ms. Mack's life easier? So as I listened to what we just talked about in the A section, we had several things that none of us asked to have more information on. I would like to be able to give Ms. Mack direction that whether we vote on it or not, that she can go ahead and include those in the budget proposals that she's working up. So I think we have agreement on, and I'm using this attachment, that's the landscape, line item number 9, 12, and while 14 has a question from Ms. DiBrienza, it seems to be, could you do that offline?
Yes.
And let us include that? Or do you want to?
I mean, if no one else has it as a concern, yeah, I can talk offline about it.
Okay. So include 14, 16, 17. That gets us to a total of 8. Yes, and 8, which is the field trip transportation that we just added recently.
So we're not dealing yet with this, with the behavior, the BICs, if you will, that were proposed tonight.
No, we're not.
Right.
We're not talking about the ads yet.
Right.
Okay. So that would be $3 million. I think it's $3 million. 3074. Okay. Is that right? Do I have that number right?
That looks right.
Okay. Take a deep breath. Let's keep going. So I think we have enough. We need enough more input on line item number 19, which is the middle school teachers, and number 13, which is the balancing classes and the secondary caseloads, that we can set those aside for now. Can we move on and talk about the B line items? There's just 4 of them. I think the question here is, are there any that you're willing to suggest we cut out of the next proposed budget, or any that you feel strongly about keeping, or any that you want more information on? And I started with Mr. Collins last time, so I'll start with Ms. DiBrienza.
The only one that I'd like to see in some way, shape, or form, I guess, now we're talking about not cutting it, right?
Just tell us what you want.
Okay. A position that attends full-time to equity, and moving the draft plan forward, I think is very important. So I don't know what that role looks like, but I'd like to see funding for continuing that work in a dedicated manner.
And then what do you think about the next 2 line items?
Wait.
Consolidate principal of adult school and education options and reduce enrollment.
I would not like us to see, to reduce by $20 per student.
Okay.
That's one I would not like to see move up to A. And when it comes to the consolidation of the principals, I defer to the staff on that. I don't have an issue either way with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dauber.
So on 23, I think we need to have a this is the equity administrator. I'd like to have a discussion about how to organize that work so that it's likely to be effective. And to me, the issue here, and we don't have time for this conversation this evening, but is really about getting accountability into the organization so that we can hold sort of the line managers here, the chief academic officers and the principals accountable for making progress here. Because I don't think that assigning this task to an administrator who doesn't have those kinds of levers to pull is effective. So I'd like to talk about how we're going to organize this work so that we can be successful. I think on the principle of the adult school, I think since our goal is ultimately to consolidate this position, I don't see the value of not doing that now and instead waiting. I think that we should take the opportunity to make those savings now, given all the other needs that we've talked about. The enrollment allocation, I am open to doing that. I also want to point out that given, if we look at our list, we're going to have to get down into this territory given the things that we have decided we don't want to do. So, you know, we don't have the luxury of not exploring these. And I think this is one that is reasonable, particularly given the fact that, you know, this amount was fairly recently increased to this and had historically been lower than that. So I feel more comfortable with that.
Thank you. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I do think that if our intention is to consolidate the adult school and education options, then sort of leaving it hanging out there when we have some other things that we know we're on the fence about. We probably need to go there now. I do think the reducing enrollment allocation, I agree with Mr. Dauber. I think the other thing with the enrollment allocation is some of our sites do have money left over from other years. We can call it reserves, we can call it whatever we want to call it. And so if we had to do this for a couple of years, it probably wouldn't be a disaster. And finally, I know we can't do the work that the MATD has put forward with one person. So we need to figure out how that's, Dr. McGee, you need to tell us how that's going to get done.
Sure.
Maybe the current organization doesn't work, but somebody needs to do the work.
Right.
So I'm not really sure if that's a savings net.
No, I think the request for more accountability and show how it works, more details, reasonable.
Okay.
Mr. Collins.
Nothing to add.
All right, so I would say for me, I have similar concerns about taking anything away from the equity work at the moment. I don't feel like we need to take our foot off the gas. We're just started to get rolling on that work. And I don't think it's the exact same kind of position that it was now. I mean, now we're sort of into implementation mode, you know, manage the parent liaisons, get some traction on that. I'm also supportive of consolidating the principal at the adult school and the education options and reducing the enrollment allocation. So with that in mind, I think I just heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. DeBrienza, I think I just heard 4 of us that do not want to eliminate, do not want to consolidate that equity administrator with the academic support. Does that sound right? I heard majority on that. And I think I heard a majority on accepting the suggestions on the consolidating adult school and education options and reducing the enrollment allocation. Does that sound right? Okay.
I think we did. Yeah.
Okay, so we're through the Bs. And I think what we are at is, I can't do that math in my head, 3.1, 3.2, 3.4 and a half. 3.4, 3.445? Ah, dang. My math in my head's not as good as it used to be. Okay.
4.7. 3.5.
All right. I know I'm laughing. This is the hardest work we do. I'm trying to keep a little levity so we can just get through this because this is difficult and no one wants to do this. But we got to do it. So let's move on. Before we go to the Cs, would you, colleagues, we have about 10 minutes left, want to address the additions that were suggested instead of the Cs, or do you want to talk about the Cs?
Did you want to go ahead and take a motion similar to the one that we did on the As, on these, to consolidate
I would entertain
these?
that motion for sure.
Let's just list out exactly which ones those are to make sure.
So I'm going to move that we adopt line numbers 9, 12, 14, 16, 17, 8, 24, and 25 for the 2017-18 budget.
Moved by Mr. Dauber. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Baton-Caswell. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let's keep going. Let me readdress my question. Would you like to talk about the additions next, given our limited time?
I'd like to talk about the additions. Anyone else?
Is that all right? Okay, let's do that. We had sort of a late ad at the lectern, so if we could hear a little bit about the BICs as well when we hear about the other additions, that'd be great.
Sure, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Wade, and then we can ask one of the principals to weigh in if necessary. So this is an issue which has really ramped up since spring break, or perhaps right before spring break. And there's a good reason for it. Because these students, and the problems they describe, the pictures are real. These are students that are really challenged and really acting out behaviors that do endanger others. And what they describe, having to evacuate classrooms, having to chase kids that run off campus, dealing with obscenities, throwing things, is correct. So why now? Why are they asking us now? So part of it is progressive discipline. As issues came up during the year, we have progressive discipline. We have behavioral plans that we implement for these kids. So what happens? Progressive discipline, after a while, you run out of suspension time. You can't continue just to place a child in the office every day. The behavior plans that the behaviorists give to the teachers require a lot of time and effort on behalf of the teachers. And with these students, some of them stick for the rest of the year, some stick for a little while, and some hardly stick at all. Some of the students go into the special education system, but we are an inclusive district, and so even if they go into a special behavioral classroom, Dr. Wade can describe the name, the kids still spend time in the regular classrooms. So by this time of year, we've exhausted most of the strategies. So many teachers have had responsive classroom training. That helps overall, but it really is not terribly effective with these, 1 or 2 students. And this will be one student in a class can create this kind of havoc that was described. So at this point of year, we need behavior intervention coaches, we need bodies. We talked about a middle school child today. We have to have a one-on-one person with that student every minute of the day. And when it's time for the break for an aide, we have to have another one in there. And so I certainly understand the problem. Will more behavioral intervention coaches help? I'm sure it will. But I think there's some other things that we need to do in a bigger picture. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Wade.
Well, I guess before I tell you what BICs do or what behavior intervention coaches do, I want to talk a little bit about why a student would do something like this. We're not talking about a behavior in isolation of a student. We're talking about a child. We're talking about what is behavior. Behavior is an unmet need. Behavior is a communication. These are children. These are people's children. This impacts a classroom. This impacts a teacher. This impacts a principal's time. This student doesn't want to be doing this. So we look at pictures here. This is a result of an unmet need in a communication. So yes, our behavior staff, which is primarily 100% special education funded, does support students in general education. And this is not a discipline issue. This is an unmet need. This is a communication. This needs quality data, observation, time to understand what happened before this. This mess in this classroom, something happened. The antecedent to this action resulted in this behavior, and what is the consequence? The consequence is not discipline. The consequence in general is time to understand what this unmet need is and what the child is trying to communicate. So yes, our behavior team needs additional support. These children need additional support. Their parents need additional support. This is agonizing for a child to have to go through something like this. So I absolutely support additional behavior coaches, looking at it from a strategic and systematic way to address general education students' needs so that our only function of supporting these students is not assessing and identifying them for special education. Behavior is not necessarily special education. So there are many reasons why students behave this way. And I think I appreciate the principals bringing this to your attention, and I think it does merit an additional resource for next year.
Is the resource that has been requested, do you think, a reasonable amount?
The principals are asking for 2 behavior coaches to split at a behavior coach for every 2 schools. And I think that this is an approach, and I think this would be an excellent pilot approach. Many of our behavior coaches in special education are pulled off of their general duties to support schools, to support individual students who are in crisis. The challenge with behavior supports is that in order to create a behavior support plan, it does take time, and it does take time to implement that plan. Once you write a plan, you have to have someone to implement the plan. So I think as a first step, adding those additional 6 coaches, we would recommend a split funding model because it's not a special education function, but I do think that special education will be providing the support and the staffing for this. I would look at some general education funding as well as potentially site funding and a reallocation of some of the money that we're talking about tonight. I think it can be funded, and I think it's a positive systemic way to approach positive school climate, positive behavior, and I think it's good for kids. So.
How much?
So the principals threw out a number, $308,000. We did a couple of calculations this afternoon for 6.5-hour range 29 behavior coaches, and it's somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000.
So that's incremental add on this 1.478 million.
Yes.
So another $350,000.
Yes. Thank you very much for sharing that. So let's go through and talk about how we feel about the potential program additions. It is 9 o'clock. Colleagues, do you want to, we still have to go back into closed session for probably 15 minutes or so. Would you like to spend another 15 minutes or so or 30 minutes on this to get through the additions?
I propose that we do, since getting back into this conversation has some ramp up to it.
Okay.
I only have childcare for so long, so if you have to go into closed session,
Okay.
I just need to make sure I can be here.
Can you give us a drop dead date, time?
I'm gonna say 10 o'clock, and I might have a little.
Oh, yeah, we'll be out of here by then.
Well, out of closed session. Okay.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Have confirmation if it's okay, if it's okay with everyone, or not?
Jesse, if you're watching, can you send her a text? Okay. Are you okay with staying in open session till 9:30? Okay, can I get a motion to extend our meeting till 9:30?
So moved.
No, I'll second then.
Okay, moved by Mr. Dauber, seconded by Ms. Baden-Caswell. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Let's see, let's start with Mr. Dauber then, the additions.
So the one item that I still have questions about is the first one on parent liaisons. We had talked about this item at our last meeting. There was some very useful response, some of which is in the packet regarding that. I'm still not yet seeing how to weigh the potential uses of these dollars, and particularly after-school tutoring versus parent liaisons. So I know that Dr. Argomedo provided a response regarding the use of Title I funds.
Right here. So,
Oh, okay.
come on up.
And
There you go.
so my recollection from our budget discussions last year is that we were unable to fund, or at least the board decided not to fund, additional dollars specifically for dream catchers in our middle schools. And I think that the need is still there. And so I'd like you to speak to that question in particular.
Mr. Dapper, do you mind if, and maybe we can get this question answered, if we sort of follow the logic we used on the other page and sort of gather up who has questions about which topics?
Of course.
And then sort of go that way?
Yeah, sure.
So we know we have a question for you, so don't go anywhere. Are there any others of these that you want to get more answers on?
No.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing about the parent liaisons. I'm also interested in hearing about the division of the investment for the high school advisory programs across the 2 high schools. And I'm specifically interested in the allocation overall of per student dollars at each high school. So what are we spending per student at each high school? I'd like to know that that's equal. Would be my goal. It's a really small amount, but I'm wondering if curriculum gets purchased with textbook funds. Don't we have a reserve for textbooks? So is that not operating? Should that not be operating? You're talking the SEL curriculum? Yeah. It's a little teeny amount, so maybe it doesn't really make that much difference. And then, do we have any flexibility on number 9? And the reason I ask is I feel like by having an open-ended RFP put out, the board didn't get the chance to say whether we wanted to allocate $370,000, which is like 3 times what we were spending before. And that cuts into other things that we'd like to spend money on. So I just want to make sure that we have a discussion about that.
Right. So I'm going to ask Brenda to join us for that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Collins, are any of these that you'd like to talk about?
Parent liaison, legal specialist time, though that can go after all the others.
Okay.
If I'm the only one interested, I'll just take it off.
Okay.
I'm also curious why the PACCC is treated as a one-time expense. And I think that's it.
Microphone, please.
Oh.
That's what they said in the back.
Yeah,
so,
no.
okay.
Do I need to repeat or?
Yes, say it one more time.
Number 1, parent liaisons, number 3, legal specialists, and number 11, PACCC.
Thank you. Ms. DiPrienza.
Nothing that hasn't been already mentioned. I have nothing to add.
Okay, and I think, Dr. McGee, you pulled number 12, is that right?
Yeah, we pulled that off.
Okay, you pulled number 12, all right. I'd also like to say a late add for us from Ms. Mack today was that the current forecast for next year has actually excess revenue over expenses of $571,000 that we were going to pull from reserves to do some of this one-time stuff, but we can have very current overage that we can use. It would have gone into reserves, so, yeah, it would have gone into reserves. It's a one-time, and it happens to be 571. So if you hadn't seen that note, that came to us late this afternoon. I'm interested in the Palo Alto community care, child care question as well. And also a little commentary on the RFP process for counseling services. What next steps on that is if we're going to do a debrief. It feels like that RFP process could have been better, for lack of a more elegant word. Okay, so we have 3 people who want to talk about parent liaisons. Let's talk about parent liaisons.
Okay, you.
And how that fits with after-school tutoring and all the other questions that Mr. Dauber teed up for you there, and the rest of us are interested in as well.
So I do remember the budget questions last year about expanding to middle school, and at that time, we did not have Title I funds. Title I funds get renewed every single year in January for the following school year. So this last January, January 16, when Title I funds came in, I did look at all the programs, and Dreamcatchers was already funded, so we looked at a different model based on the MATD, which really stressed early education in literacy, and also at the high school level support for students of color in AP courses and getting them to graduate. So this year we did a pilot, and we hired Tutor Corps, who gave us a reduced rate for expert tutoring, because that was the term that was going around. And the tutors are college educated, they're experts in their field, and they meet the student where they were at. So for example, the students, some of the high school students are meeting the tutors at the College and Career Center, and they're helping them get through economics. We have data that I can provide. We've had 2 students who weren't going to graduate from an economics class, and they were able to give them tutoring. They were Buena Vista students, and to actually get them. So we're using that type of tutoring at the high school, and also to support students who have decided to take AP courses. And that model is different than the Dreamcatchers, where the Dreamcatchers is an organization that uses volunteers. And so this model has proved very successful. So we decided this last semester to try this model at 3 elementary schools: Addison, Walter Hayes, and Ohlone, and really look at foundational writing. And so low-income students are getting one-on-one tutors with expert tutors and helping writing in the class. So it is a little bit of a different model that we're using than the Dreamcatchers, and that has been very successful. Parents are getting, and teachers have been giving us the feedback. So we're using the Title I money for that type of tutoring, which really is giving the one-on-one help for the students. And so we're hoping to expand that at the middle schools and use our at the middle schools and expand the Title I funds that way. So not necessarily to expand Dreamcatchers, but to expand that model where we get the one-on-one tutoring. Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, I just would follow that up by asking whether, in terms of the dollars that we're talking about here, if we decide to expend $229,000 in this area, can you speak to the benefits of spending those dollars on parent liaisons versus increased expenses on tutoring, for example, of the type that you're describing?
So they're really interconnected. So the way I will tell you that the high school program has been very difficult to start because we have to depend on getting the students there, talking to the parents, and the parent liaisons have been key in getting the parents to participate in these programs. So they're calling the families, they're explaining to the families in Spanish, and really getting them to understand the importance of it. So we've used the parent liaisons to get the students to this tutoring program. And we have seen a really high increase in parents participating. Recently, we had a parent meeting about a principal search, and we were able to get parents there, translators. And so that type of work of getting parents at the school has been instrumental in supporting these programs. Because one of the issues I have through my programs is sometimes parent participation, student participation, and the parent liaisons have been able to really make that rise. I think we've been seeing a lot of parents come in. Unfortunately, sometimes they're complaints, but they're really not. It's advocacy for their students. And so they've been really instrumental in giving us a voice. Recently, we did a survey for VTP parents and got 140 families to respond. That has been unheard of. I've been in the past 55, and because we send mailers, but the parent liaisons called the families told them how to do it. They did it on their phone because they were able to. And so really giving the parents the type of tools so they can participate fully in their students' education.
When we talk about caring adults, this feels like a place where caring adults can make a big difference in these students' lives. I'm very supportive of this. Questions from that end of the table?
Yeah, could you articulate, my understanding is that there's some group of people, I don't really know you've developed this working group structure that's trying to figure out ways to make progress either with these funds or other funds in terms of some of the MATD. Is this ringing a bell at all, or am I?
So we've been, the equity coordinator, Dr. Castellon, has been working with the MATD in working groups. Is that
Yeah,
what you're
I
speaking?
think so, yeah.
Working groups on each of her objectives
Yeah.
and to really move the equity plan further and develop it, because I think instructions from the board that it needed further development. And so those are the working groups.
So I guess the question I have is, I look at this and we're saying $229,000, which is a lot in the scheme of the different line items we're talking about, being put toward parent liaisons, which I don't, it's like a lot of things. It's hard to say that more parent liaisons would ever be a bad thing. The question is it the highest and best use, or are there other programs or other opportunities that we could fund with all or a portion of this money? And it just feels, I think this has been said a couple times as this item's come through, is it just feels like we're putting all our eggs in this basket, and it's not, aren't there other baskets? And I think, Mr. Dauber reaches for tutoring, and I don't know what other things we can and should reach for, but it just feels like we're focusing on parent liaisons. And, I've spent time with parent liaisons. I've spent time with historically underrepresented Spanish-speaking families. And the parent liaisons are good, but they're not advocates for the students. They're communication tools, right? And it's like, is that really what's going to move the needle here? Or are we just saying that that's what we have and let's have more of it?
Well, I think in the beginning, when we've got the first allocation of $80,000, they were just a tool of communication. But if you would look real deeply, we're looking at really doing some parent engagement, empowering the parents to really participate. This year, I worked with Palo Alto Housing Corporation and did like a parent university. We did workshops on how to understand the progress report, how to do number talks. Sorry. And so we're really going to use the parent liaison. So we have the parents now participating and coming to events and taking them that further step. I would say that parent participation is one of the things that makes Palo Alto Unified School District the lighthouse district that it is, because we have parent participation from about 85% of our families. And so that 15% that we're missing, they need a little bit extra help. They don't have as many resources. Sometimes there's a language barrier. Income does play a part, and the parent liaisons are trying to make that bridge. And so I would say that if we're very serious about closing the achievement and opportunity gap, this is a powerful tool. Hopefully, maybe in years to come, we would not need that. We would have a lot of internal staff. But I don't know if our staff right now is completely equipped, as we have emerging populations in different sites, that the teachers have not had these populations come in. Demographics are shifting, and so I really feel like this is a powerful tool.
Thanks. Ms. Baton-Caswell, you also listed this one. Is there a question?
Yeah, so conceptually, having more adults paying attention to particularly students that typically are in more challenging situations and families that have a gap, that completely makes sense to me. I think what you're hearing from the board, or at least my question, is how do we make sure that we know how this program is going and it's not just anecdotal feedback? So what kind of clear evaluation program? What I would feel I need for this is a clear evaluation program so that we can look at the spending and see whether it's working. I just don't feel like I have data right now, and what I have is a lot of anecdotes. But if we had a clear evaluation program for this and it was working, then we could point to that. And actually, I feel like that on a bunch of our programs, that having clear evaluation would help with the people that say, well, I heard from Joe Smith that this program sucks. And, it's like, well, I don't know if it does or if it's great. I don't have the data. So that's what that is my biggest question here is, what's your evaluation program? How do we make sure it's clear?
So we have been, we evaluated the principals and administrators to see if the parent liaison was something that they would wanted to pursue forward. And it was, we got a lot of data from them. And we are putting surveys out there for the VTP families. That was we're trying to do subgroups first. And we have an open survey right now for our English language learner families. And then the low income families, when I go back to do the last parent class, we're going to have them do a survey online.
So
Oh, sorry.
you don't have to give me all the detail.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, in order for me to continue to be supportive of spending more money on this, I think I need to see a clear evaluation plan. You don't need to verbally give it to me. I think it needs to be written, and we all need to agree that that's what we're going to use to evaluate it.
Yeah, that's part of the MATD plan too, isn't it?
Yes.
In that item 1, so.
Well, and let me just sort of piggyback on that for a second. I'm particularly interested in evidence that this program lifts academic achievement for the students who benefit from it, because this is a case where there's a chain of causation that has a fair number of links in it, unlike tutoring, for example. And I don't want to. You're right. I'm harping on that, but it's not that I'm mandating it, but it's. I could see it at various points where that might break. And so having evidence that it's actually efficacious would be important before I would want to ramp up to this level.
I'd love to shadow a parent liaison, actually, if that's possible. I'd like to shadow a liaison.
Yes.
And go hang out and see how they spend their time.
Can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
About the liaisons? Thank you. When thinking about, I hear most of the board mentioned at the last board meeting, is this the best use of the money? And I think that's a great question. And I do think making sure we have some evaluation systems in place and really a sort of a needs assessment of all these things that the MATD came up with or are in the process of coming up with, and identifying what is the best use of our funds. But I do know from going to the MATD sort of on the road, one of the main things that parents mentioned was, we need more of a contact. We need someone to let us know where we can go if there's a problem. So I think that a parent advocate, communicator, I think that's an important role, and I don't think that any of us would say it's not. I think what the model is still a question. And I think that we found from this year, the way that we did it this year, that wasn't the most effective way that it was set up. So this was a sort of a ramp up to try something different. So I'm not against spending money on this issue, because I heard from dozens and dozens of parents that this was really important to them. But I think we have to really look at whatever model we choose. Is it effective? Is it the right model to use? Is it the best use? I have no doubt that spending money on this outreach is important. I just don't know what the model looks like. So thank you for paying attention to that. But I do think that money in that bucket is a good idea. Although I think we need to continue to look at all of those buckets and continue to prioritize.
I mean, if you told me, these are teachers, right, and they're certificated. If you said to me, these are teachers, and they're able to advocate for the educational needs of these students and provide a kind of independent check on the decisions that the school is making, and then act in that way, I would be able to see the connection more clearly between these staff members and the educational achievement of these kids. That's the kind of, that would make me feel more comfortable. It would be a different model, but it would strike me as more effective. I don't want to design a program from up here, but the skepticism that you're hearing from me is like I'm trying to draw the connection.
Ken's designing a program.
That's what I don't want to design a program means, is I'm designing.
Any other questions on this topic? Okay, we had, thank you, Dr. Argumedo. We had a quick question, I believe it's a quick question on the second one, the high school advisory programs, and I think the question was that we're looking for confirmation that we're not handing we're not allotting more money to one school than to the other for this, since our model has been to
Right.
be
So-
equal on a per capita basis.
And wait, can I just clarify? Our model has been to be equal on a per capita basis overall. And the schools have opted to spend that money slightly differently. And I think the community expects that overall, each school gets the same amount per kid. And I'm just saying that because I'm a little concerned that we're only focusing on advisory. And you know, I'll just be really frank. A number of years ago, Palo decided to spend more money on an advisory, a counseling program than Gunn decided to spend. And Gunn decided to take that extra money and spend it on other things in the school, which was fine, assuming that the outcomes that we wanted to have happened. Now, there's been a migration over time now for Gunn to want to do an advisory model, which is great. But if we're going to allocate more money to one school than the other, we're going to create some problems in the long term. So that is my question here. It isn't, are we spending the exact amount, the same amount per student on advisory? It's an overall question.
So I have the dollar amounts here, and I asked Dr. Herman to step up because she can provide the details. Most of the money in this is allocated to the Titan advisory program, and it's and so right now we have gone through the whole counseling model: school counselors, college counselors, other counselors, college classified, Titan one-on-one coaches, 9th grade advisors, 10th to 12th grade teacher advisors, TA classified, registrar, so on and so forth. So we have, I think, 11 different lines. The Palo total is $1,678,000. The Gunn, or approximately $839 per student. The Gunn total is $1,390,000, approximately $695 per student. We add this $140,000, which pays for the advisors at Gunn. That still brings it up to $1,520,000. It's still less than Palo, and we are getting the program that has been on the GAC. It predates me and predates Dr. Herman. And if you would just say a few words about just the quality of the work that's gone into this and the planning is extraordinary. What we're getting for the money.
I think you're not on, yeah.
Yeah.
Brenda and I
Yeah.
were able to co-chair the SEL committee, and I think that this really is the first phase of implementation of that work. And having served on the committee with several really highly quality people from Palo, they're intending to do work to implement the SEL curriculum and add that to their advisory program. They weren't in the same position that we were to start it this year. So in terms of the curriculum and the training and paying the advisors, I imagine that this will be something that will continue to grow. We have volunteer teachers who are ready to start work in the fall. We have our training lined up. It's a very high quality curriculum. It's everything that you've been hoping for and more. So we're very excited.
So I am very excited. That's not my question, though. I do want to support your program, but I don't want to unbalance the investment per student at each school. And the numbers, Dr. McGee, that you gave us was just for counseling, but if you look at total school spending per kid at each school, I would like to know that we're spending the same per kid at each school.
Well, we won't be based on experience of teachers. I mean, the amount per, I mean, part of this depends on seniority of staff too. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into, it can never be exact. I mean, we hire a counselor fresh out of school, you have one who's been here 20 years. There's going to be a difference right there.
So what is our per student spending at each high school right now?
So right now for the,
Not for the counseling,
well, that's
overall.
all, I don't know, I'd have to defer to Ms. Mack.
I think one of the things that can be difficult is we both have varying other revenue streams that make it very difficult for it to be equal. Besides the allocation that we get from the district, we have sometimes grants that are awarded to us. We also have income from our rentals. And so, you know, when we have construction, we're going to be down quite a bit of money on our rental income from people using our classrooms on the weekends and things like that. So our income from non-district allocations can fluctuate between Gunn and Pally. So there might be some years where Kim has money to invest in a certain program and I don't, and vice versa.
So Kathy, do we adjust our allocation per student for the high schools based on those things? Based on grants and things like that?
Rental revenue?
Do we, what we give from the general fund to each school to pay for teachers and everything else, does it change year to year based on grants and rental income?
So rental income is different by school. We don't. So Denise is correct.
Can I try?
Yeah, you.
So we're just about out of time, but I think the question that Ms. Bacon-Caswell is after is it our philosophy that we make distributions to the schools to spend on a per capita basis? And I think her question is, if we do that, do we comprehend the other sources of revenue they have and maybe give one school more because they don't have the rental income that the other one does, or they don't get the grants? Are we trying to equalize for those things, or are we just giving them dollars on a per capita basis?
So for high schools,
I can't quite hear you. You need a little closer to the mic.
right. So for the high schools, the allocations to the two high schools are the same. And then each school will receive additional revenues from other sources like rental from the PTA, and we don't equalize.
Yeah.
But
So
the district's allocation, we do allocate, the same amount or per student to the two schools.
Okay, I think I have a question brewing over here.
Well, so I'd like to comment on this, make a couple of comments. One is that we do have a policy with regard to counseling that we have equally effective programs for both schools. And actually, I think what parents expect is they are less focused on the dollars, which I think shift, frankly. It's hard to believe that we have an exact number of dollars to the penny between these two schools. They expect that both schools are going to provide an equally effective educational experience. That's we've reduced that to board policy with respect to counseling, and we haven't actually satisfied that requirement, which I think everybody on the board knows. We've been discussing since at least 2011, when I stood up there and talked about this, that fact. And so we're really on the verge now of finally rectifying that. So I think that parity at that level is really important. But I also think that I would apply here the principle of progressive parity, that we don't require that we allocate equal resources at every moment, but that we accept that we may have imbalances for a period of time while because we have some dynamics here.
So this is your philosophy, though. This isn't our practice.
So let me just finish. If we were to shift, as I think we are, to an advisory model at Gunn, presumably that would be reflected in the counselor FTEs at some point, right? Because the board over the last X years has increased the number of counselor FTEs at Gunn to sort of invest in that counseling model. And for this coming year, we're not drawing down those number of counselors. I would expect at some point, as we shift to this model, that we would expect a mix that looks more like Pally's mix than Gunn's current mix. So that over time, as we complete a transition, that we would see an equal investment, not only in counseling, but across both schools overall. That's how I think about this.
So first of all, I want to say, Denise, I think you have a plan that brings you closer to what we have been asking for a long time. So this is not to attack your plan in any way. However, what happened way back when is Pally took their allocation per student and put more into counseling. And Gunn took their allocation per student and put more into, I believe, English classes, but it might have been some other things. which means that Pally is spending less on the things that you're spending more on. And so if we put more money towards counseling for Gunn, which it sounds like we need to do, I feel very strongly that we need to make sure that we have an even allocation to Pally. I don't feel that Pally should be cut back or in some ways punished for decisions that they made in the past that were the decisions that we wanted them to make. So this is not to attack your program in any way. This is to, and maybe we need a board policy, Ken, because I think if we each individually have philosophies and we don't document them, then we end up fighting about things like this. I don't, do you have some commentary on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I absolutely think that we've been talking about the GAC for forever and that we need to get this done. My question is, do we need to give Pally something so that it feels equal and that the dollars they invested years ago have borne fruit, but they use those dollars in that way? And do we need to give them some other dollars to do something else? We're not going to answer that question tonight. I see Kim's here poised at her mic. Jump in, ma'am.
So what Melissa's referring to is back in 2011.
I don't think you're on.
Green.
Now I'm on, okay.
Now you're on.
Back in 2011, well, somewhere around then, Pally did make the decision to allocate more of our PI resources to guidance and counseling in our TA program. So there is a pretty substantial difference between what Pally spends on guidance and counseling versus Gunn in PI. I think it's a difference of about $250,000 right now, give or take. So yeah, when I hear this number being proposed and I'm thinking about our own team, we're looking also to start implementing a lot of the SEL curriculum next year. You know, I see this as an opportunity for us to maybe make sure there is that parity between the schools in terms of those numbers and not have to rely on PI so heavily for funding what should be guaranteed guidance services for all students in our district. Being able to use that money for some of the innovative electives and some of the other programming would be a really great way for us to use those dollars.
I definitely think Pally would benefit from having additional funding to spend on their program innovations also. But I do want to remind people also that from 2011 until where we are now, we have added additional counselors at Gunn from our PI funds. So we're only allocated 6.2 for each of our buildings, and we have 10. So I also use a very significant amount of the PI funds. So I think what started originally as a pretty significant difference in counseling spending, over the 3 years that I've been here, we've continued to increase it. So we use our PI funds similarly to Pally for guidance counselors.
Thank you. So given our timing, if anybody has anything burning to say, please do. Otherwise, I would just say, I think what you're hearing is robust support for SEL, support for our high school students, but just a little more detail on how that we would do that and make it equitable, you know, with respect to the decisions we made in the past. So team, I think we might be finished for this evening. Ms. Mack, did we give you enough direction to keep going?
So we need to continue this discussion.
So it would appear.
So we should, the agenda setting committee should look at what our options are.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Another
yes.
meeting, yeah.
But we made progress.
Right.
Could you
so
pat us on the back, please?
great
We made some
progress.
progress.
So we have 3.4.
Can I make a suggestion
Yes.
that at a minimum, we actually approve the 3.4 at the
We did
next
already.
meeting?
We did today.
But we didn't approve the budget that included it. We approved,
Oh.
so
We approved her including it in the budget.
including in the budget. And that's what I'm suggesting is if we feel like we need more discussion, we could certainly, well, I don't know if we can or
I
not.
think we can't, well, we can't sort of finally approve it until we adopt the budget itself in June.
Yeah.
But I think we've given enough direction so that I think what you're looking for is a certainty that this is the direction we're going to go, absent some.
So in terms of balancing the budget, right now we're okay because at second interim we said we need to cut about 3.3 million, and so we've actually reduced or board approved a total reduction of about 3.4. So in terms of balancing the budget, we're okay. However,
we might want to add a few things.
Right,
Yep.
right. The board has to make decisions on the additions, and we need the funding sources for these additions.
Okay, all right.
All right, so if we don't make any additions, we're good.
Okay, board's going back into closed session. This is it for this. Good night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, thank you, Denise, thank you.
Yeah, that was good, huh? You guys had it teed up nicely. I think everybody.
Actually, we made more progress than I thought we were going to make.